Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy NFL Week 9, halfway mark of the season. What the hell is going on? How are we already halfway through the NFL season? But here we are, Ian Cameron and Philip Nelson, as always, with you. And look, we are recording this on Thursday, October 31st, otherwise known as Halloween. Now, I've got my orange on and black pants, so that's basically my Halloween costume. I did not tell Philip before this show that he had to do anything special, but he's putting on the old ECU helmet. He wanted to put some kind of Halloween get up on to celebrate the day. Phil, looking like your playing days several years ago with that helmet on.
Well, my costume, I was thinking initially I was going to say, I'm a bad football player right now. No, I'm just kidding. I'm more of a sad football player right now, but we got the win. ECU finally on the board here, so I'm happy for them. I'm not going to wear this the whole show, but this is the man, this helmet took a lot of hits, man. Bradley Chubb. Oh gosh. I mean, a lot of hits, a lot of wreckage there. So, but happy Halloween, everybody.
You miss the game. You don't miss getting your head knocked off. Your block.
No, I have my fair share of concussions, so I'm good on that.
If you have the Giants offensive line playing in front of you or something, or what?
Something like that. Jeez.
That's a shot right there.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, I hope none of my linemen see that. But I think that we could say that I got knocked unconscious. Shoot, I can't remember. Shaquille Griffin was the D end with one hand, right?
Yeah.
He knocked me unconscious when we played against UCF. So our left tackle went right when the slide protection was left, and I took one right to the back.
And he's a cornerback, so it must have been, like I said, corner blitz. See, out of the secondary. Yeah. So they brought extra men because he's.
No, I'm sorry. His brother then. Who is his brother? That was a D end with one hand.
Oh, it's Griffin's brother.
Yeah, remember he played for the Seahawks. I can't remember what his name was. But they were brothers. There was one cornerback.
Oh yeah, Shaquem Griffin. Shaquem Griffin.
Yeah. That's the one. It was the D end. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
There you go. Yeah, he was also UCF, so he's the one. He's the Griffin brother that almost knocked you silly there in that day.
Yeah.
That's the one thing you miss playing, but you don't miss, like I say, the pain and the ice baths and having to recuperate every week from just taking a beating. Like oftentimes quarterbacks do, but there you go. So a football player, a sad football player is.
That's a good little segue into our Jets in Houston with Aaron Rodgers and his new drink concoction that he says helps him each week with his body aches. You see that cayenne pepper and water he's drinking now?
Wow.
Trying to get the body right. You got to try that out. See if that helps me. I still have aches.
I don't know if anything's going to help the Aaron Rodgers or the New York Jets for that matter.
Yeah.
But it is a great segue into Thursday night football to get us going here in week 9. Houston and New York. We've got the Jets 2-point home favorites, 42.5 the total in this game. I feel I need to stay the fuck away from this football game here tonight on a Thursday night. Maybe we bet. Actually, there are a couple props I like, and I'll mention those. First things first, we know Houston. We think Houston's the better of these two teams. No, we still know Houston is the better of these two teams. So why the hell are we not betting them +2 against a New York Jets team that just cannot get out of their own way right now? That was the low point of the season that was already slipping away for the Jets, but they fall to 2-6 with just a disgraceful loss against the New England Patriots. There's so much I have to say about what they did wrong in that game. Obviously, the play calling, burning all 3 of your timeouts early in the first quarter like that. The defense just struggling against Jacoby Brissett, who had to enter that game because Drake May got injured for the New England Patriots. And that's all bad. Greg Zuerlein missing kicks. How the hell is he still employed right now?
Is he still on the team?
He is. I haven't heard anything that he's been cut. Not that I've seen. So, you're not even working out another kicker to challenge this guy? That's actually, you know what? They put him on IR, and they've added kickers. They say it's an injury designation here for Greg Zuerlein. Nevertheless, like I said, I would just cut, injury or not. He has cost the Jets in a couple of games already, and none more so than the New England game because he missed a field goal and he missed an extra point. in that game against the Patriots. But that's not even the worst part, Phil, about what happened to the Jets last Sunday. The worst part is they actually go down the field, score a touchdown with 2 minutes left, take the lead by 5. So obviously, simple math, you're up by 5, 2 minutes, you're going to go for 2. You got to try to make it a 7-point game so that a touchdown for the Patriots after that doesn't beat you. So they go for 2. They get a delay of game penalty on the 2-point conversion attempt. That's an absolute disgrace. That cannot happen. It makes the 2-point conversion attempt obviously pushes you further back. It can't happen with a veteran quarterback like Aaron Rodgers. How is that possible that you get a delay of game penalty in that situation on the 2-point attempt? Sure enough, they don't get it. They're only up by 5. And here's Jacoby Brissett looking like Joe Montana in that pocket. Tom Brady in his prime in that pocket. 3rd and 9, 3rd and 11, no problem. Converting first downs against that miserable, sorry, overrated as hell New York Jets defense and going right down the field and winning that game. I cannot back the Jets. They're unbackable. But here's the problem here, Phil, with Houston. Okay, they are really banged up on the offensive line. And there are some issues there. They are extremely cluster injury riddled at wide receiver now. Nico Collins was already out, and now Stephon Diggs torn ACL out for the rest of the season. So you're down to Tank Dell. And I like Tank Dell. But Tank Dell is your lead receiver, your number one guy. That puts a lot of pressure on him. And now who's going to step up behind him for the Houston Texans? That's a real concern. The good news for both of these teams is they have run games. And plus, on the flip side, this Houston pass rush, Will Anderson's coming to the forefront lately. He's been great out of Alabama for the Texans. And this Jets offensive line, poor Aaron Rodgers, is not getting much time. And he's under pressure, it seems, every single week. We know he lacks the mobility he used to have. So I don't see the Jets going up and down the field here. Houston, by the way, though, can run the football. They got Joe Mixon back. Joe Mixon was a large part of that offense last week against the Indianapolis Colts, and the Jets have had trouble stopping the run. I think that's been the most shocking thing about the Jets, how bad they've been at times against the run. So this should be a good game for Joe Mixon to get going, and I think they'll feed him a lot. John Mechie is probably someone that's going to have to step up to help Tank Dell at receiver, but that's the one issue with Houston. Their offense has not looked great since Nico Collins went down. Now you got some O-line injuries, and now you lose Stephon Diggs as well. That's not exactly an offense that I fully love, on the road on a short week. That being said, it's Houston or pass for me. And I'll say this. We've got a rookie head coach, interim rookie head coach in Ulbrich, who to me looks in over his head. He doesn't look ready to be an NFL head coach with all these penalties and the delay of game on the 2-point try was ridiculous. He looks like he's in over his head. I don't trust him on a short week. We talk about this an angle a lot over the years on this show. The rookie head coaches on Thursday Night Football are a bet against usually. They struggle. They're not used to the quick turnaround, having to prepare their team on the fly for an opponent on Thursday night. And on the other side, you've got DeMeco Ryans, who not a rookie anymore, obviously. Second-year head coach, and he's the better head coach. He's probably more adept, to handle a situation like this where you're playing on a short week and going on the road. So, but I am concerned about the Texans. I am in this spot with all these injuries. So I don't love it, but I'll tell you right now, Phil, it's Houston or pass for me when it comes to Thursday Night Football. And the prop that I like is Joe Mixon over rushing yards. I think it's 71.5. I think he can go over that number. I think it's going to be a run-heavy game plan, especially with the injuries at receiver. The Jets haven't been great against the run. To be honest, the Jets could be able to run against Houston as well. Houston's weakness is stopping the run on defense too. So can Breece Hall and or Braylon Allen maybe get going this week for the Jets? We'll see. But Houston or pass for me. Phil, what do you think? Texans, Jets?
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. Like you said, the rookie head coach, short week, not a great situation to be in. This Jets defense honestly has kind of plummeted since Saleh has been fired. So that's the other thing. I think he's just kind of a little bit in over his head. Clearly there's a lot of discipline issues with the Jets. And, I watched some of the Belichick, he's done some reviews on the Jets, and I mean, they just don't contain the quarterback very well here. CJ Stroud, I think that's an actually really good thought on the Joe Mixon over on the rushing yards, because I do think that the Texans are going to rely heavily on the run game here. But I agree, Texans are pass here, and the Texans are much more disciplined, well-coached team. The Jets, man, you know what? The only argument you have for the Jets here is desperate teams are can be dangerous. And we're witnessing right now something that it's historic how much talent is on a Jets team that has been failing so miserably. So I'm staying away from the Jets. This is a Texans bet for me, and I love the Joe Mixon over rushing yards, especially with the two main receivers being out.
Wow, how about that? Ringing endorsement from Phil with that Mixon prop. Love it, he says.
Yeah, dude. I mean, that's a great thought. I mean, I didn't think of that until you said that, but that's a great thought. They're going to rely on this run game, and the Jets' rush defense has been horrible as well. So ever since Saleh's been gone, so I could see that definitely. I expect Mixon to get plenty of touches tonight, especially rushing attempts. So 71.5, man, that's a great thought right there.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a situation where, again, the run game is going to be very, very indicative early and often here. And you saw it last week, even against the Colts. Mixon got a lot of the carries there in that game. All right, let's move to Sunday. This game, one of the uglier games on the board. Two teams that just can't get out of their own way. Although the Patriots did win last week, albeit against a Jets team that, as we know, is floundering. New England, Tennessee, 3.5 point home favorites, 38 the total in this game. One thing I have a tough time doing is asking a bad team to win 2 in a row, to put good games together. And that's what we would have to do here with New England. And I don't even know if I would say it was a great game. It was more taking advantage of a Jets team that's just finding ways to lose and has just their season's crumbled now at 2-6 on the year. The Patriots continue to be an over team. 4 of their last 5 games have gone over the total. Now, their offense has been better than we thought, but a lot of that was Drake May, and Drake May gets injured. We'll have to see if he's able to play this week. It could be Jacoby Brissett once again under center for the New England Patriots. But to Jacoby Brissett's credit, a guy that struggled early in the season, which is why Drake May got the chance. And the fact Drake May is limited in practice, it's certainly starting to look more and more like Brissett will get the start again for them. But even Brissett, who's, had a solid game against the Jets, against the really bad teams, you could even see him have success like he did. And Tennessee's defense has kind of fallen off a cliff here 2 weeks in a row. Now, they did play Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions, but still, that defense just get ripped in both of those games. 34 points to the Bills. They give up 52 points to Goff and the Lions last week in that game. Although some of that was, defensive touchdowns. Some of that was, there was a punt return touchdown in there as well by Detroit. So it makes the defensive numbers look worse than they probably are. But still, it's a Tennessee defense that, from what I'm seeing with the eye test, they're getting worse by the week. On the flip side, though, Mason Rudolph, I'll tell you what, he had some Will Levis type plays last week, bad decisions, but he also moved the team. And he also was able to put up points at times, which sometimes Levis has had a hard time doing. I think it's going to be Rudolph again. I don't love the game, but I'll tell you what, I think from a Tennessee standpoint, 3.5, I don't know if I can get to them with 3.5, but if it was at -3 or better, I would lean Titans. I don't trust the Patriots to going on the road after the win against the Jets. 38, look, it's low, but I could only go over with New England right now. Their defense has completely fallen off. And their offense has actually looked capable, even with the O-line concerns and the lack of weapons at receiver. We still saw Jacoby Brissett play okay, after May got injured last week. And Tennessee's defense, like I said, getting worse, not better each week. So I lean over at 38. Phil, what do you think? Pats, Titans.
I agree. I think this is an over, but I will say, I think this Titans defense has been kind of the anchor that has been holding them together, and that's completely fallen apart. I know that Kelvin Ridley came alive last week. Unfortunately, he was on my fantasy bench, but I could see the ball getting moved a little bit more between these two defenses. So I think that an over is a good thought here as well. But I'm leaning Patriots, man. I think they're going to kind of ride this a little bit here. And I mean, if they're giving me 3.5, I'm liking that. And I think that I could see the Patriots kind of trying to build off this while the Titans are kind of in shambles right now.
That's the issue, obviously, with taking Tennessee here is, laying more than a field goal. I'm not sure I'm excited to do that. L.A. Chargers, Cleveland Browns. We've got the Chargers 1.5 point road favorites, 43 being the total here in this one. Cleveland gets the spark. from Jameis Winston that we kind of called that it could happen last week on this show. We said, it's going to be a shot in the arm because I think the whole team just they were not responding to Deshaun Watson. Let's be honest. I mean, you saw the body language. You saw just how almost, comatose the Cleveland Browns looked in certain games, especially as the struggles mounted for Deshaun Watson. Sure enough, all of a sudden, here's Jameis Winston getting his first start against Baltimore. And here they are, 8.5-point dogs, beating the Baltimore Ravens outright, 29-24 last week. Winston was excellent. He protected the football, which is always the concern you have about Jameis Winston. He sometimes throws picks. He can be, and that's why he's a great over quarterback. I've said this for years. He gives points to his own team. He gives points to the other team sometimes with some of his throws and decision making. But it was all for his team last week. No interceptions, 334 through the air, shredded that Ravens secondary. Very impressive performance from Winston. They rallied around him. They get the big win. It was not the greatest spot either for Baltimore. They were off Monday Night Football against Tampa Bay, and certainly they didn't play their A-plus game, that's for sure. Browns took advantage of it. But now there's some film on Winston for Jim Harbaugh and his Chargers coaching staff going into this game. That's certainly going to help. The Chargers have really kind of righted the ship, you can say, since the bye week. They've won 2 or 3 games coming out of their bye, winning at Denver, blowing out the Saints last week, 26-8. And look, blowing out the Saints a couple weeks ago wouldn't have been a big deal or that impressive because they were beaten up with injuries. They got a lot of guys back last week other than Carr. Rattler still played, but other than that, they got a lot healthier on defense. They got Olave back at receiver. So that's a solid showing by the Chargers to beat up the Saints like that. 26-8. Their defense played well in that game. We'll see how they fare here against the Browns. There's been a lot of over money in this game, from 39.5 all the way to 43. People see what we saw last week. You love the over. Your best bet, Phil. Ravens, Browns over. He's an over quarter. They're an over team, much more so with Jameis Winston at quarterback. There's no question. They've got a downfield passing game. Now the Chargers have been an under team, but now they're going on the road. They're facing, I think, probably a better offense than a lot of what they've seen. Like the Saints, not as good of an offense as this current version of the Browns with Winston, in my opinion. Denver comes and goes offensively. Arizona was really, really hampered on the offensive line when the Chargers played them a couple weeks ago on Monday night. So I agree with that over money in this game. It's up there now at 43, but certainly I thought 39.5, 40. And this was one of those games I bet early in the week. I saw 40 when I got on. I'm like, that's too low now with Winston. This is not that same Cleveland under team with no offense anymore. So I agree with that move to the over. I kind of like the Chargers, though, from a side perspective. I know it's an early start game. Very interesting stat. Jim Harbaugh in his career, 49ers and the Chargers combined as an NFL head coach, 7-1 against the spread in these early start games. So they've actually been very good in these spots. I still think their defense is really solid, and I think could provide that one extra stop that maybe Cleveland's defense doesn't give them. And maybe just a little bit, because now you're playing, a Chargers team outside the division. A big win, emotional to beat Baltimore, division rival. Say what you will about how disappointing the Browns have been. To beat Baltimore is a big deal. That's emotional. Maybe a little hangover for the Browns. So, and I still think the Chargers are the better team, quite honestly. So, a 1.5 here, it would be the Chargers for me. Phil, what do you think?
Yeah, you know what? I got to start looking at the lines earlier in the week, because I even think, even at 43, I think this is low. So I'm fully on board with an over here. Jameis Winston has provided a spark, and I mean it's debilitating when you have a quarterback like Deshaun Watson that couldn't hit a 10-yard stop route, and he's sailing it over everyone's head. So one interesting
thing move in the pocket, mobility shot for Watson, which we've talked about for weeks. Yeah,
that too. And one surprising thing last week with the Chargers, I mean, obviously Justin Herbert starting to throw some touchdown passes. You take away Justin Herbert's 49 rushing yards, and the Chargers rushed for 77 yards total as a team, which is surprising given the fact that Harbaugh wants to pound the rock here. I think that this Browns team being at home, coming off that win, I think they're going to ride this a little bit. There's still not a ton of film out there on Jameis in this Browns offense, so I'm leaning over, and I'm actually leaning Browns here with another upset victory. I think they're going to ride high on this one and continue to do their thing offensively. Defensively, obviously they let up some things as well. The other argument too is, if the Ravens fucking catch a few of those interceptions, that makes the game a completely different story as well. But I think that Jameis Winston, knocking off some rust, he's got a huge win under him. He's got some confidence. He's playing with house money at this point. No one expected him to do anything. So I think that's a dangerous thing as a quarterback. And this offense coming off this win, I think this team's rallying around him. Another home game. I'm going Browns, and I'm going an over here.
All right, there we go. Against each other, we are with the side, but we agree with the total here with the Chargers and the Browns in this one. Shout out to Ladd McConkey, rookie out of Georgia. He has really stepped up. They've had some injuries at receiver, the Chargers. He's stepped up. He had a great game against the Saints, 2 touchdown receptions for Ladd McConkey in the win against New Orleans. And Justin Herbert, like I said, the last few games, that was a really good game from him. 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 279 through the air. He's probably as healthy as he's been all year. And that's a good memory. He's had that ankle for bothering him for so long. But looks like he's getting better and better each week. New Orleans and Carolina. We've got the Saints 7-point road favorites, 43.5 the total in this game. We'll see if Derek Carr was questionable last week. Will he be back this week is the question. It looks like it. Saints Carr set to return from what I'm seeing on the latest injury reports. So it looks like he is going to be back. And look, I'm not a big Derek Carr fan, but after what we've seen from Rattler, he's an upgrade. He is. I mean, I'm not a big Derek Carr fan at all. You know what I think? He's checked down Charlie at times. He's interception prone. I guess prone to making mistakes under pressure. I get it. But I still think he's probably the best quarterback option they've got, unless they decided to give Jake Haener a look, because that kid out of Fresno, I made a lot of money betting on Fresno State when Jake Haener was the quarterback there years ago. But they haven't given him really a fair shot, Dennis Allen and the coaching staff. So at this point, he's the best they've got. And remember, Derek Carr was at quarterback week 1 against Carolina. How many points did they score against Carolina? I think they're still scoring touchdowns against Carolina right now with that week 1 performance. But boy, oh boy, they just laid a whipping on Carolina in that first game of the season. This Saints team, we'll see 47-10. I've been cashing in with these opposition team total overs against Carolina, and every single week it's coming through. I mean, they've given up 34, 36, 38, 40, 28 in the last 6 games. Or last 5 games, I should say. They've been absolutely miserable. This is the worst defense in the NFL. I think over 25.5, which is the Saints team total. I'm leaning with that right now. The question is going to be, what can we get from the Carolina offense if it's Bryce Young at quarterback? Because he kind of had everybody fooled in that opening drive against Denver last week, and then he did absolutely nothing. It was just the same old hideous, horrific, awful version of Bryce Young that we've seen from day one right after that. He did nothing after that first drive. Denver completely put the clamps down on him, shut him down. So that's the problem with betting a full game over in this game, is trusting Carolina to do enough offensively here against the Saints. So I don't love this game, and I could see the Saints actually being in for a battle, because the Saints are 7-point road favorites. That's not exactly something I'm trusting. Now, they're getting healthier, as I said, including last week, but they get blown out by the Chargers. I think if I get involved in this game, a game I don't have a strong opinion on, but if I were to get involved, I would probably just take my chance again, taking the opposition team total over against Carolina, because that's how bad their defense is. So Saints team total over 25.5 is probably where my lean would be in this one. Phil, what do you think here with the Saints and the Panthers?
Yep. Ever since we've been doing the show, I've been really looking into these team totals, and that's exactly the direction I was heading to, with the Panthers giving up as much points as they do. I think a team total is probably the only bet I'd feel comfortable placing on this one. I don't love this game either. I think it's a little bit all over the place. It could go a lot of different directions. Is Bryce Young playing? Do we know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Bryce Young's in.
Bryce Young is playing again. So that's another reason. I just he just looks still discombobulated back there. I would lean, if anything, a Saints team total over. And I think that the Saints are going to pull out a victory here. But yeah, I don't trust the Panthers to cover this total either. Don't have a strong opinion either on this, but that team total I completely agree with.
Yeah, I'll end up putting a few bucks on it because I don't like it as much as some of these recent ones. The Saints can be a little flaky at times, but even they should be able to get to 26 or so against this team, especially with Derek Carr back in the fold. All right, AFC East rivalry renewed. Miami and Buffalo. We've got the Bills 6-point home favorites, 49 being the total here in this game. I was so impressed, and I like the Bills last week. You did as well against Seattle. I was just so thoroughly impressed because of the fact that, it's one of those games where you're traveling all the way out there. You're playing a non-conference team, maybe a little flat. They weren't. They were great. Start to finish, their defense completely bottled up. Kenneth Walker on the ground. I'm shocked how good their run defense has become. The Bills. Suddenly, it's hard to run on them. Kenneth Walker did nothing. And then Geno, they just teed off on him, especially when they got the big lead. And the pass rush just enveloped Geno Smith in that game. Dominant win for the Bills against Seattle, and then now they're back home. And Josh Allen, man, it's almost like he's got this laser focus right now. He didn't want to hear it after the Seattle game about all the adulation for how well they played. You know what? That's done now. It's on to Miami. We got to get ready for a big division game. It's exactly what you want to hear from one of your leaders and one of your quarterbacks. And when you talk about the domination, it doesn't get much more dominant than what the Buffalo Bills have done against Miami. They've won 5 straight. They've covered 3 in a row, including, of course, a couple of playoff wins over the Dolphins. They won, obviously, 31-10 in Miami in week 2. That was the game Tua Tagovailoa got injured with that head first, going head first to get the first down. Damar Hamlin, of all people, ends up getting him concussed and injured in that play, a guy that almost died on the field a couple years ago. It was just stupidity for me, Phil, for Tua to do that. Like, you've got to protect your health. You've had multiple concussions. You should be sliding at every opportunity if ever you're going to run with the football, not going in head first, taking shots like that. That's just absolutely absurd given your injury history. That's taking, your future health in your hands, in my opinion. So Tua is back. He returned last week. We were both questioning how good he would be right away, coming off an injury, hasn't played in weeks, but he played great. And the offense was fine in that game against Arizona. Tua threw for 234, 28 of 38, great numbers. All of a sudden, we find Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle getting involved again, 10 catches for both of them. That doesn't excuse Mike McDaniel totally going away from Hill and Waddle when Tua was injured, though. That was ridiculous against the Colts, that with Tyler Huntley at quarterback, they forgot that Hill and Waddle were on this team. Now, it's good they got him going with Tua back in the fold, Hill and Waddle. But still, the game plan on offense still leaves a little to be desired for me. The defense, what happened to them? Because the defense had actually been playing decent for the Dolphins. And here's Kyler Murray carving them up, 307 through the air. Trey McBride, they had maybe you bet Dalton Kincaid over receiving yards and receptions in this game. Trey McBride at tight end for Arizona had 9 receptions for 124 receiving yards last week for Arizona against Miami. So maybe Dalton Kincaid is going to have a monster day at the tight end spot here for Buffalo, because they clearly could not defend the tight end. Marvin Harrison Jr. was great in that game, but still, that was a pitiful game in the secondary for Miami, giving up 307 passing yards to the Arizona Cardinals in that game. That's not good when you see Josh Allen starting to get going in the passing game, Phil. We know James Cook, they've run the ball a lot, but I like what I saw in the passing game. Keon Coleman's getting better every week. Khalil Shakir's back from injury. Amari Cooper now, 3rd game. He's going to get more comfortable. That was a bad defense. Now, I know Miami's desperate to beat Buffalo. They're chomping at the bit. I don't know if that's enough. I lean Bills here at minus. I'm not stepping in front of Buffalo right now. They're playing great. It would be Bills or nothing for me. I lean to the over in this game as well. Thought maybe Miami might be an under team because never know how Tua would play first game back. He's getting all the questions already this week. What have you got to do to finally beat the Bills? So he's going to come to play. Hopefully that's going to lead to at least some offensive success. And after what I saw from Miami's secondary last week, I have a hard time thinking they're shutting down this very strong, very balanced now Buffalo offense. So the over might be in play here. Phil, what do you think? Dolphins, Bills.
Yeah, the thing that I lean strongly for in this matchup is the over. I the Bills are averaging 28 points a game right now. They're hot. They're getting their receivers all set and ready. Obviously, Amari Cooper's getting in the mix here. You mentioned Khalil Shakir coming back. I fully anticipate the Bills to exploit the Dolphins here. I expect them to score more than 28 on these guys. And then I think just the addition of having Tua back and that offense looking a little bit better, obviously. I think the Dolphins are going to put up enough points to help with this over here. And Bills -6. I mean, I could see this being more so like a 30, 35, 38 to 17 type game. So I'm going to go over and Bills -6. That's a pretty simple one for me on this one.
This next one's pretty simple for me, too. Dallas and Atlanta. We've got Atlanta 2.5-point home favorites, 51.5 the total in this game. Dallas, after I don't know what happened. And look, we got to admit when we are wrong as well. And we both took a shot, I know, with Dallas last week, looking great in the first half. That's all coaching. You can't tell me that's a lot of that is coaching. McCarthy and his staff got completely and utterly schooled, destroyed, taken from pillar to post by Kyle Shanahan after halftime. I mean, it was just all San Francisco from that point on. They made their adjustments. 21-0. How does that happen? 21-0 in the third quarter for San Francisco. That tells you your team is just not ready to go. You thought you had it won in the first half. Is that it? Or is it just, your coaching staff is not San Francisco's? That's probably the bigger issue. The defense reared its ugly head again. Couldn't stop San Francisco for much of the second half. That Dallas defense that's had issues all year. They give up 223 rushing yards. It's amazing that, Jordan Mason gets injured. And here's Isaac Guerendo coming out of nowhere. Who the hell's that? Yeah, he just put up 85 rushing yards against that Cowboys defense last week for the 49ers on Sunday Night Football. Purdy had a much better game throwing the ball against that defense. Just that defense continues to have problems. And now they got to go from a road game in San Francisco to another road game here in Atlanta. I don't see them slowing down Atlanta and their offense, which has not had issues. The Atlanta offense has been good outside of the Seattle game, which was a one-off. During this 4-1 run, they've scored 26, 36, 38, 31 in the other games. Cousins, a flawless game against Tampa Bay last week. Bijan Robinson and Algier on the ground made it happen. Kyle Pitts is finally percolating. 91 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns for Atlanta in that game. Darnell Mooney as well. Drake London. There's weapons on this Atlanta offense, and we are definitely seeing it right now. This is a clear as day over the total bet for me. Atlanta's an over team piling up points. Dallas is still better offensively with Dak in the passing game. And the thing with Atlanta is their secondary is still a little spotty. They did give up 330 passing yards to Baker and the Bucs last week. And the strength, Dallas doesn't have a run game, so they have to be able to throw the ball, and they should be able to. Atlanta's secondary has been leaky. So this is a clear as day over the total look for me. Dallas, Atlanta, 51.5. It's high. It's high for a reason. I lean Atlanta, too. I'm not trusting Dallas again on the road. Asking them to win now on the road, can't do it. What do you think here, Phil? Dallas, Atlanta.
Yeah, I agree. This is an easy over for me. I think, obviously the Cowboys, their only offense is through the air, and the Falcons' defense versus the pass is just brutal.
And the pass rush is not great. They don't get
pass rush is terrible. So I think the Cowboys, they're certainly going to be coming off another embarrassing performance, ready to go. But I don't really know. Just with the lack of talent and just lack of rushing game that they have, you're right. You just can't trust the Cowboys at this point. Would I be surprised if somehow the Cowboys sneak this one out? Not really, because the Cowboys tend to be a team that will, all of a sudden have a game where it's like, whoa, where's this been? And I think the Falcons are a team that's susceptible to making some mistakes. Especially defensively. I mean, they're there and with Kirk Cousins and the offense, I mean, they're doing a great job, but I could see some things happening here. I did see some reports about Micah Parsons potentially trying to make a comeback and DaRon Bland as well. I'm not really sure. I saw that they both did not practice yesterday. But
DaRon Bland's back. That does help the Cowboys secondary. This will be, I believe, his season debut. I don't think he's played this year.
Yeah, so they're talking. There's been some murmurs about that, so that's something to keep your eye on. But I'm definitely in the over here, and I just can't trust the Cowboys, so I'm taking the Falcons as well. But this over one that's a safe bet for me.
And Trayvon Diggs sitting out practice. By the way, he had a little spat with a reporter after the game last week in San Francisco, all over social media there.
Which, I mean, you see the play that he was talking about. I mean, he
Yes.
just ran down the field with Kittle. He just let him go, and it's like, dude, what do you? Just lack of, the
He
Cowboys
deserved to be criticized by. I don't blame the reporter. The reporter's
No.
doing his job. He's asking questions about certain
Exactly.
things
It's like,
during the game.
what are
That's
you
what they
doing?
do. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that once again, this Cowboys team just does not respond to any sort of discipline with Mike McCarthy. The Falcons they're on the rise. I think that they're continuing to offensively exploit teams. But I mean, that's kind of why I'm leaning towards this over, because that you can't trust their defense, but you just can't trust the Cowboys as a team. So this is a hard hit over for me.
You and I both. And like I say, Atlanta, I think, the last home game, they're not going to like the fact that the last time they were at home, they got absolutely drilled there by Seattle. I think there's no one to say. We don't want to have two stinkers at home in a row like that. So that's why at less than a field goal, I like the over, though, more than the side. I still worry about that Atlanta defense a little bit. Yeah. All right, we've got Denver and Baltimore. The Baltimore Ravens, 9-point home favorites, 46.5 the total. Interesting game. Baltimore, you got to think they're in bounce back mode big time after that stunner against Cleveland, losing outright as 8.5-point road favorites in that game. And if you remember, they were 7.5-point favorites against Washington. They won by 7, but failed to cover. They were 8.5-point favorites at home against the Raiders early in the season. They lost that game outright, blew it in the fourth quarter. And I bring now all those games up where they were bigger favorites, because now I've got them at 0-3 against the spread this year as favorites of a touchdown or more. And that's just a smaller sample size of a larger issue that Baltimore has had in this kind of price range. In the last 4 years with Lamar at when Lamar Jackson has started at quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens, when this team is a 7-point favorite or more, they are a shocking 2-11 against the spread. Wow. In those games, 2-11-1 against the spread. Lamar has been a phenomenal underdog ATS. He's been good in the pick'em range. So maybe a short favorite, he's been good, but you get him out there as a big favorite like this, 2-11-1 against the spread for the Baltimore Ravens when laying a touchdown or more. And now the one concern I've got here, though, for Denver is you played a New Orleans team on Thursday night 2 weeks ago. We were all over that, Phil. Banged up. Denver was going to probably take advantage of that and win that one comfortably. They did. And then Carolina last week. You're going from the Saints and from the Panthers to this Baltimore team, and it's a huge step up in class of competition for Denver on the road, too. There's no doubt. But there's reasons for optimism. Denver's defense is getting better. You're seeing it each week. Bo Nix, after a bit of a rough patch at times this year, he is starting to get more comfortable with his receivers. And the secondary for Baltimore continues to get gashed and ripped, on a weekly basis. There's still a ton of issues with them as far as defending the pass is concerned. They're excellent against the run, but the secondary has certainly had their share of issues. And look, they didn't run the football great last week. It was mostly Bo through the air, 284. With 3 touchdowns against Carolina. I think Bo can move the ball through the air against this secondary of the Ravens. And I think that could keep them in this game. Remember, Denver went on the road against Tampa Bay. They were underdogs of over a touchdown there. They won outright against the Bucs early in the season. They've just been a consistently horrific, larger favorite, the Baltimore Ravens in the Lamar Jackson era. So I'm going to be on the Broncos here with the 9 plus the points. In this game. And Baltimore, until I see them proven otherwise, Phil, they are an over with their totals in their games until proven otherwise. Simple as that. I can touch a Baltimore under right now because they can move the ball with Lamar and Derrick Henry, and that offense and that pass defense especially is still a very problematic area right now for the Broncos. And with the way, Cortland Sutton, Adam Trotman, this Devon Vele, who's really stepped up lately for Denver, the way they're starting to get chemistry with Nix in the passing game, it wouldn't shock me if Denver's able to move the ball through the air. So it would be Broncos and over for me. What do you think here, Phil?
Yep, spot on. The Denver defense is tremendously improving throughout the whole year. They got, the third best scoring defense, allowing 15 points a game. But, the Ravens offense is a whole different beast, especially coming off of a loss versus the Browns. So I could see this being a high scoring game. The other thing too is Bo Nix has had, 4 interceptions in his first 2 games. And since then he's only had 1. So he's protecting the ball. The one stat that I'm seeing too with Nix is that he's 1 for 11 passing when he's pressured. But the Ravens also, they rank 27th in QB pressure rate. I think the Broncos are going to be able to move the ball here. And the other thing, the other underlying theme of the Baltimore Ravens of 2024 have been they play to the level of their opponent. They play up to the level, they play down to the level of their opponents. So 9 points for the Broncos, I'll take that all day. And I think just given the fact that the Ravens will score, even though the Broncos defense has been showing, that they're holding these teams to 15 points a game, the Ravens are going to score. And I think the Broncos will too. And so I think that this is going to be a closer game than people think. I'm taking the Broncos +9 and an over as well.
Yeah, we're in agreement. Like I said, now the one thing I'm worried about is Denver's not ready for a better class opponent like this, and Baltimore
Right.
steaming after losing and they run them out. But I haven't seen a ton of evidence of that, especially when they've been this kind of favorite. I mean, the evidence bears it out. I mean, 2-11 against the spread is a damning record.
Yeah.
Like if you've been laying these points of this magnitude, 7 or more with Baltimore, you've had your teeth kicked in, the last few years.
Yep.
From a betting standpoint. So it's tough to lay these kind of points with Baltimore, given that track record. Speaking of teams that are tough to lay points with, how about the Cincinnati Bengals? They're laying 7 here in this game against the Las Vegas Raiders, 46.5 the total. Look, do I love the Raiders? No, but what I look for, especially in a game like that last week against Kansas City, when you traded Devontae Adams, when your season, they probably know it, they're not going to the playoffs. Do you still see compete? Do you still see this team given that effort and strong effort? And right to the end, they gave that effort against Kansas City last week. That was a pretty close game. I give them credit. 27-20. They lose to the Chiefs. They get a backdoor touchdown from Gardner Minshew to cover the point spread in the final few minutes of that game. But 27-20. I know it's their 4th straight loss, but the Rams game before that, they covered the number there with another backdoor score against the Rams team that's maybe starting to get a playoff push going now with Kupp and Nacua back. So you look at those last 2 games. This team hasn't tapped out. Okay, they have not quit on the team. They have not, or the season. They have not quit on their coach. Even though they're having a rough year, they're 2-6. You're still seeing them fight the good fight. The effort's still there. They're still checked in. That might be all it takes for the Raiders to cover this number. Because right now with the Cincinnati Bengals, I mean, the offense, again, after a good opening drive, they stalled the rest of the game. The defense goes back to getting shelled. I mean, it looked like that defense was coming around for the Bengals, but maybe it was just you played Deshaun Watson and you played the Giants. That's probably why you were coming around on defense in those 2 games. Then you played someone good offensively, someone with a pulse, Philadelphia last week, and then back to the old Bengals defense getting ripped, getting shredded, can't stop the run. Can't stop the pass. Not much of a pass rush. The whole gamut. So this team's a mess. Can't lay 7. At least not me with Cincinnati. It's a question of do you want Las Vegas? And I lean to them. What do you think here, Phil? Raiders, Bengals?
Yeah, I agree. A big factor here for me as well is if the Bengals get T. Higgins back this week. I think he's been shown to be a huge part of this offense.
It was a huge loss last week without him. You could tell.
Yep, exactly. And so, I mean, monitor that. I see he's questionable right now, but I just don't trust the Bengals either right now. And you look at Gardner Minshew's stats week in and week out. They're not terrible, but it's the backdoor things that they don't quit. The Raiders are certainly they're sticking in these games somewhat. But yeah, I just I would a lot of my bet with the Bengals would rely on whether or not T. Higgins is in there as a big play threat. I just can't do it with the Bengals -7 right now. Just given the state of their defense as well. I would probably lean towards Raiders +7 here, but I don't have a strong opinion on this one. This total as well is a little bit tricky, for me without T. Higgins, because I know that he's that big play guy that can, all of a sudden have that 80-yard touchdown. So, I don't have a strong opinion on this one, but I think the Raiders will stay within 7.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Don't love it, but I lean to the Raiders. All right, we got Washington Commanders and the New York Giants. Giants, or Commanders rather, 4-point road favorites. The total 44 in this game. You could tell last week, and what a unbelievable game with. Well, I don't know if it was an unbelievable game. It was not the greatest game. It was pretty dull for parts of it, but what an unbelievable ending with the Hail Mary from Jaden Daniels for the Washington Commanders to beat the Chicago Bears in that game after the Bears had taken the lead late. It reminded me of some of those, and I think even Jim and Nance and Tony Romo, and Jim Nance had an incredible call of that, by the way. But I think they even said it on the broadcast. It reminded them of some of those Aaron Rodgers Hail Mary touchdown passes, because Aaron Rodgers has been the king of those over the years. High arc, way up in the air, tons of hang time, tons of time for people to get under it in the end zone. And then, of course, it ended up getting batted up. That's the cardinal sin, batted up in the air. And there's Noah Brown on the receiving end of it for the Washington Commanders. Other than that, though, it was a very shaky performance from the offense for the first time. You could tell Jaden Daniels with the rib injury, was still not 100%. That was not the best performance from him. He was limited in practice yesterday. He continues to battle through the painful rib injury. I think he's going to play. You commit to playing him once through that rib injury, and you're putting him through this ordeal of having to tape up his ribs after every drive, and that's what we were seeing last week. Give him credit for the toughness he's showing.
Yeah.
But I think part of that too is, look, Chicago's got a solid defense, no doubt, and that was certainly a little bit of a better defense than the Commanders have played in recent games. But now you go to this Giants team that's just all out of sorts, all out of whack, just the mistakes and just that was a winnable game for them against Pittsburgh on Monday night, and they still found ways to lose. The defense got carved up in that game. Same old issue. Now, Daniel Jones was better, but again, the O-line in critical situations couldn't protect. TJ Watt with the game-sealing sack fumble and ends up ending that game. The O-line is still a problem until they get Andrew Thomas back, and there's no telling he'll return this week. That's not an offensive line I trust, and Washington might be able to get a pass rush. To me, what I would look at here in this game is not -4, not the total. I would just focus maybe Commanders team total over 23.5. I know it was a rough game for Daniels last week, and the ribs probably have something to do with it, the rib injury. But I think against a weaker team, weaker defense, he'll probably bounce back. They'll probably look a little bit more like the Washington offense we've seen for much of the season. So I would be maybe looking at Commanders team total here, which is over 23.5 right now. What do you think here, Phil? Washington, New York Giants.
Yeah, I think that Giants Steelers game last week. The Steelers. I think some of those touchdowns called back, and God, George Pickens getting 2 right feet down. There's a lot of things that could have actually made that game a whole lot worse for the Giants than what it showed to be.
Yep.
But given that, they did not capitalize on any of those mistakes that the Steelers made. I see this Giants defense as being very susceptible, through the air and the ground. I fully anticipate the Commanders to win by more than 4 here. I really do think that. I like your team total as well. I think the Commanders can put up some points here. It's going to be whether or not the Giants can. And one thing that we have to monitor is Tyrone Tracy, because I know he got injured twice, and it looks like he's taken a full grasp of the starting running back spot.
He's been great. Give him credit. He's been terrific.
He's been absolutely great. So I think that's something to monitor, whether or not he's going to get in there and play or not, because if he is, that gives the Giants a running game, which Daniel Jones needs in order to perform. He needs a running game, and an offensive line. Shit, geez, I mean, like you said, I mean that offensive line's just been brutal. He's been sacked like none other. So I would monitor the Giants' offensive line health and Tyrone Tracy, but I fully anticipate the Commanders to win by more than 4. And then I also that team total. I mean, I think I definitely expect them to surpass that. It's going to be whether or not the Giants can keep up. And I don't know. I don't love this total here either, but Commanders, I expect them to win by more than 4.
All right. Yeah, you like the spread with Washington -4 a little more than I do. I like the team total more, but you're right. From a side perspective, as far as the point spread, still Commanders are nothing for me. Here in this. Now, the one concern is the Hail Mary win. Such an emotional win. Are you flat as a pancake here? That's always what you worry about when you're coming off that kind of a win, that kind of an ending last week against Chicago. But still, I feel that with the way with where these two teams are at right now, -4 still looks like a pretty reasonable price here with Washington. All right, Chicago Bears, Arizona Cardinals. These are the late games now on Sunday. Arizona 1-point home favorite, 44.5 the total in this game. How do the Bears pick themselves up off the mat? They thought they had that game won. It was a nice drive by Caleb Williams and the offense to give them the lead with 2 minutes left. And it's funny, the drive before that, they fumbled down by the goal line, and it looked like that was going to be their chance gone. And then they get the ball back. They get a stop. They get the ball back. They go down. They score a touchdown. They think, all right, now we're going to win this game. No, they didn't. The Hail Mary at the end from Jaden Daniels. This is why Bears fans, and I know a couple, are pissed with Matt Eberflus. This guy's game management and ability to make decisions on the fly, what to do, what scheme to play, what defense to play, this kind of shit. He's cost them some games with bad late game decision making and management. How the hell do you just give Washington the out route and the 15 yards to get to midfield and put themselves in Hail Mary range for Jaden Daniels? You lose the game not maybe because of the Hail Mary, but because you let the Washington offense get into Hail Mary touchdown throwing range with that. There was nobody around the receiver at the sideline there. Easy as can be. Picking cherries. 15 yards, stops the clock with 2 seconds left, gets to midfield. Like, what are you doing there as a coaching staff? What are you doing on the sideline? Like, that's your deep, like, jam someone at the line of scrimmage. Or maybe bring some pressure. So he's got to get the ball out quickly, and there's not time for that out route to the sideline to get out.
Guard the sidelines at least. Guard the sidelines, and then have your people on the end. Like at the end zone.
Like, how do you see that? You're a quarterback. You're a great person to talk about this. Wasn't that just totally absurd by the Bears? Awful management to allow that so easily.
Yeah, and then Eberflus's response to that too. Oh, that play didn't matter. What? He's not throwing the ball.
They don't get a Hail Mary off if you don't give them 15 free yards and the chance to get out with 2 seconds left out of bounds.
Exactly. That's just like the Chiefs Bills, from that playoff game in 2021, same thing. Why give them the yards, and geez, Rex Ryan on ESPN was going nuts too about even the last play as well, like at the line of scrimmage. Why do you have a guy shadowing spying
Jaden
Daniels? You know what I mean? Like
provide an extra body to defend the pass.
Is he going to run the ball, 60 yards in there? Like, what the fuck are you doing? So, Rex Ryan's a full believer in sending, a blitz on a Hail Mary to, force the ball up, send at least 5 guys, and the fact that they sent 3 and 1 guy spied was just completely irresponsible. So, yeah, terrible.
And they got some moron there, Tyreek, whatever his name was, Stevenson, I think was his name, just flapping his gums to the crowd while the play has already started.
I love that. Yeah, I love that.
He's the guy that tips it in the air, too. Yeah.
Oh, my gosh, that's terrible.
They actually, I'm sure the team forced him to publicly apologize or make a statement too after, that's just like, and he's flapping because he thinks, hey, there's no way they're gonna get a fucking Hail Mary touchdown on us, and he's jawing with the crowd. That's a bad moment. That's a horrible look. I know.
Then he's the one who volleyballed the ball up too.
Yeah, he did.
He didn't even do his job. So,
God, what a disaster. Disaster with the coaching staff and just giving them the free cushion there to get out of bounds, to put them close enough to get it to the end zone, and then the final play with the spy on the quarterback. Are you kidding me? Are you shitting me with that?
Yeah, right.
Stupidity, and then Stevenson's antics. That's not a good, well-coached team. Any Bears success they have is in spite of the coaching staff. I'm fully convinced of that. Because there's talent there, we know that, but this is not the first time Eberflus has fucked up a late game situation. How do they respond now against Arizona? It's a tough, crushing loss. Arizona continues to be that little engine that could. They're a scrappy little team, 4-4 now. They've won 2 in a row against the Chargers and the Dolphins. That was a great win with Tua back, and they kept answering. Kyler Murray kept responding in that game, and 28-27 victory for the Dolphins. We'll see how this one goes. The more I look at it with the Bears, I mean, the victories were Tennessee, the Rams when they were beaten up without their top 2 receivers, Carolina and Jacksonville. Those are the wins for Chicago. That's not a who's who. That's a Sisters of the Poor right there if I've ever seen it as far as teams I've beaten. I'm leaning Arizona here. at this one near Pick'em. Coming off a beat, they're off a huge road win. That's not always an optimal spot. And usually I like Arizona more as a dog. Now they got a win in this game, but I have a hard time trusting Chicago coming off that Hail Mary defeat. That's a gut punch. Let's see what kind of mental toughness this team has this week to respond. Lean over as well. What do you think, Phil? Chicago, Arizona.
Yeah, I'm on board with you. I think the Cardinals are gonna, they are the little engine that could. That's a great way to describe them. I think that they're a scrappy team and that they put up points. And it'll be an interesting thing to see the Bears, the Bears defense versus Cardinals offense. But I do anticipate I think Kyler Murray's having a great year. He's running around. Man, that guy's fucking fast. He's making the throws. So I fully anticipate that the Cardinals to win this game. And I could see an over as well, just with the Bears just trying to put up some points somewhere in the 14 to 20 range. But I think the Cardinals are going to put up some points as well. So I'm leaning over in the Cardinals here.
Yeah, the Arizona offense got back on track after a tough game. They had some injuries against the Chargers. They definitely had a better O-line situation last week.
Trey McBride looked great, so it's a huge weapon. He's getting his bearings back as well coming off that injury. But, yeah, I think the Cardinals are going to move the ball, and I think the Bears will stay – they'll stay competitive, of course. They've shown that they have the capability to do that. It'll be interesting to see how Caleb Williams plays as well. He's just not been super consistent, but I think that this over in the Cardinals is a safe one for me.
Jacksonville, Philadelphia. We've got the Eagles 7.5-point home favorites, 45.5 the total in this game. Eagles, we had some issues with them. They didn't look right. It was ugly against Cleveland, even though they won. They lose to Tampa, the ugly win against New Orleans. They lose to Atlanta. Like, nothing's looked great for them, but boy, I give them credit. The last 2 weeks, they've looked more and more like that, maybe potential Super Bowl contender. Some people thought the Eagles could be this year, like they were, of course, a few years ago when they got there against Kansas City. 28-3 against the Giants, 37-17 against the Bengals. Now, look, the Bengals and the Giants are struggling. So let's keep that in mind. But so is Jacksonville, the team they're playing here this week, 2-6. That being said, you look for signs that a team hasn't given up on their coach or the season. And Jacksonville, they get the win against New England in London and against Green Bay last week. The fight was there. The battle was there. Now they did benefit. They did benefit from Love being out, but Willis stepped in, completed 4 or 5. Couldn't stop Josh Jacobs on the ground. More issues with the run defense here for Jacksonville. You got to believe maybe Saquon Barkley licking his lips right now, maybe licking his chops right now to face this run defense of Jacksonville. So Barkley might be a good prop bet here in this game for Philadelphia. But I can't lace this many points now with Philly. But do I trust Jacksonville's defense enough on the road with what we've seen from Hurts and this offense? Finally, and look, having the healthy Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown makes all the difference as well, and we're starting to see that. I think the best bet here is just go over the total. I think Philly can score, and I think Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence and company. Now, they did trade Cam Robinson, their left tackle, to Minnesota, and he's obviously a stalwart on that O-line, and that O-line's weaker without him. Kind of a sign that they're selling off a little bit, Jacksonville. That bothers me too. So that's probably why I wouldn't take Jacksonville, but I'm not crazy about laying more than a touchdown with Philly. I think the over is probably the best look here. What do you think, Phil? Jags, Eagles?
Yeah, I think the Eagles are hot. They certainly responded to all the criticism that was given to them earlier in the season. Saquon, like you said, I think that between the run game being able to just exploit this Jaguars rush defense, I think that's going to be a huge key in this game. If the Eagles can get up early, man, it'll be interesting to see what happens here with the over and whatnot, because I could see them just bleeding out the clock with Saquon. But that being said, I think 7.5. It's a little bit close for my comfort here. I would probably lean towards that, but like you said, hit the over here. I think that's a safe one. The Jaguars, they haven't given up. They can move the ball. The offense is kind of, they're certainly still moving the ball, scoring points and whatnot. So I feel much more confident in this over here. And if I had to put something, I'd probably lean Eagles minus 7.5 too.
And you can still throw on that Eagles secondary. I still think the secondary is a little susceptible for Philadelphia.
Yeah, absolutely.
And let's be honest, they faced a Giants offense that's struggling and a Bengals offense that's struggling the last 2 weeks. So, I think Jacksonville can score a little bit here
Yep.
in this game on Sunday. All right, we got a good one next up here. Rams and Seahawks in the division, NFC West. Rams 1.5-point road favorites, 48 the total. Normally, when I see a team home underdog at home off a blowout loss, especially a home blowout loss, playing at home again, I want to back that team, in this case, Seattle. But I also felt that win for the Rams against the Vikings last Thursday night with Kupp and Nakua back, and just how well they played in that game is a sign we want to make a push to make the playoffs. And there's been all these rumblings about Sean McVay's team that maybe they're going to trade Kupp before the trade deadline. But I think that win kind of quiets that down, that they're going to try to keep it together, the core of this team, and try to make a run at making the playoffs. And they certainly can. They're very much still alive in the NFC West now after that win against the Vikings. And I have a feeling they could go on a bit of a run here. And at the same time with Seattle, there's injuries on the O-line. That's concerning. DK Metcalf was a huge loss for that Buffalo game last week. They looked not so good at receiver without him. If he doesn't play again, that also hurts. The defense, which looked better against Atlanta, reverted back to that old Seattle defense. Not much pass rush, struggled against the run. Obviously gave up big plays in the passing game. Josh Allen at almost 300 passing yards. Matthew Stafford, even though he's at the latter end of his career now, he can still make you pay. And the fact he's got his best two receivers back certainly makes that offensive passing game for the Rams a lot more potent. So, like I said, usually these are the spots that you love to step in and back a team like Seattle. Home underdog off a home blowout loss, redemption, embarrassed. They feel ashamed about the way they played against Buffalo. They'll want to respond, but I don't know if they're the better team right now. I think the Rams might be, and I'm leaning Rams here. As long as this doesn't get much higher, and we're only asking them to win the game, I would certainly maybe lean to the Rams here in this game. And by the way, the Rams have won both meetings last year against Seattle, 17-16 at home and 30-13 in Seattle last year. So the Rams took both head-to-head meetings last year between these teams. I think they might win this one too. What do you think here, Phil? Rams, Seahawks.
Yep. Stafford looks like a completely different quarterback, having both his weapons back in Puka, as well as Cooper Kupp. So I think, and we saw that last week. I mean, they started off the game hot. Sean McVay knows how to call his plays, man. It's unbelievable how open he can get his receivers. And, if you're watching the Rams, take notice of their tight splits. That really kind of causes fits for defenses, especially because they're a zone run team, the Rams are. So, I mean, they get those receivers in there blocking, but then also with tight splits, I mean, you can expand the field downfield. You can run crossing routes. You can run out routes. These tight splits cause fits for defense, and that's kind of a newer thing that McVay kind of brought into the NFL. That being said, I fully anticipate the Rams to score points on the Seahawks defense, and I'd be curious to know what the team total is for the Rams here. But I think the Seahawks, that
24 and a half.
24 and a half. I mean, I think that's a safe one there too. I fully anticipate the Rams to put up more than 24 points here. And I do think the Seahawks are going to try to stay within striking range throughout the rest of the game. They can move the ball, like you said, coming off an embarrassing home loss. I think they're going to be ready to play. I'm leaning Rams here, -1.5 and an over here.
All right, Rams and over for Phil. We move on to, it's his Green Bay Packers. It's one of the games of the week coming up on Sunday in Week 9. Detroit Lions, Green Bay Packers. Lions 3.5-point road favorites, 48 the total. Tom Brady, him and Burkhardt, that lead Fox crew, will be on the call for this big matchup here in Lambeau. Let's wait and see if Jordan Love plays. We don't know yet. Last we checked, though, Matt LaFleur is optimistic that Jordan Love will be good to go here in this game against the Detroit Lions, which obviously gives them a much better chance. Obviously not. Look, Malik Willis has done fine, but you obviously want Jordan Love to be available in a game of this magnitude. I just don't know if I want to step in front of Detroit. I get it. They're laying 3 and 3.5 in some places in this game, but we already saw the Lions take down one team that thought they were good enough to beat them in the division, Minnesota, a few weeks ago. And what's to say they can't do that again here in this matchup? And by the way, they've made Lambeau their own personal playground the last couple times they've played there, Detroit. They've won 2 in a row at Lambeau Field. So that Lambeau mystique doesn't get to this Lions team. I was impressed that after a big division win, maybe it was Tennessee that bad as well. I'm sure that was part of it. But to have that big emotional division win, I thought maybe Tennessee could hang around a little bit, and they were just wiped out 52-14 by Detroit. But at the same time, you can't turn the ball over. You can't obviously have pick sixes. You can't have punt return touchdowns. And Tennessee was just a disaster in all three phases, offense, defense, and special teams against Detroit. But credit to the Lions. No emotional hangover after that huge last-second victory on the road against Minnesota in that battle for first. Until Detroit gets beaten, they're the team to beat here in the NFC North. Until they get beaten by Green Bay, I'm not stepping in front of Detroit. I can't do it. I think there's reasons to think the Packers can win this game. They can establish balance in the offense. If the defense can get pressure on Jared Goff, easier said than done with that great offensive line that Green Bay has. But covering down the field, too, I worry about that a little bit. Like Trevor Lawrence had 308 through the air.
Yeah.
And other than Jair Alexander, there's still some questions there about how good that Packers secondary is. I love Kraft at tight end. We like the weapons. We like the Dobbs and Watson and Wicks and Reed are really starting to fire on offense in the passing game for Love with this Packers team at receiver. But I think Detroit's got, if it's going to be close, competitive game, I just think Detroit's become so good in these close games that if they might make that extra play, that makes the difference. So I don't know if I'm betting Detroit because I haven't moved on this game yet, but I am leaning Lions a little. I just can't step in front of them right now with how good they've been. What do you think here, Phil? Lions, Packers?
I weirdly feel better if Malik Willis was playing in this weird little gut feeling that I have. I just think that the dynamic of him being able to run the football and then how the offense slightly shifts when he's in there. Relying heavily on Josh Jacobs and some of these weirder formations that allow Malik to get easier throws out, but then also a ton of different, read option, all these different, handoffs to Jaden Reed and all this stuff in these weird formations that they got in earlier in the year when Malik was playing. Jordan Love, man, he's still just turning the ball over, some bad.
There were a couple last week against Jacksonville. I'm like, as someone that had a little bit of Green Bay team total and which still ended up cashing for me in that game, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing, man?
Exactly. And so, I think the Lions, obviously proven team, they can win multiple ways. They can beat you in special teams. They can beat you, obviously, offensively with that offensive line, through the ground, pass game behind it. Goff is playing great. I'm not stepping in front of the Lions here either. Minus 3.5. I could see a close game here. I'm not sure about, the minus 3.5. But I'm not stepping in front of the Lions, like I said. And I also think that this will be an over game, just given the fact that I think the Packers are going to give up points, but I think that they're going to get a few points put up. Obviously, I think LaFleur's calling great plays. He puts his players in positions to be able to score. I'm leaning Lions minus 3.5, but I really like this over as well.
I think the over can get there because I think Detroit can have their way on offense and score some points. I think Green Bay will be challenged to stop them consistently, but throw out the Tennessee game. Tennessee's pretty bad.
Yeah.
The other game that Detroit played without Hutchinson for the first time, full game start to finish, was Minnesota, and they did give up 29 points in that game.
Right.
Detroit's defense. So that's why the over could get there, in my opinion. I would agree with that here with the Lions and the Packers. That's a great game. Looking forward to it. How impressive is it? We all knew it was no secret Detroit was going to be one of the best teams in the NFL, the NFC, and be a Super Bowl contender. How impressive is it knowing all that? Because sometimes you don't get point spread value with teams like Detroit that are expected to be good, expected to be one of the best teams. And here they are 6-1 against the spread.
Yeah.
In addition to the 6-1 right. So you've still made money all season long backing the Detroit Lions. The only game they didn't cover was when they lost outright as favorites to Tampa Bay. The second game of the year. Other than that, they've covered every point spread this year. So it's been very impressive. Another reason why I'm reluctant to step in front of them. All right, let's go to Sunday Night Football. Indianapolis Colts, Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota 5.5-point home favorites, 46.5. The total. Don't look now. After that undefeated start, here's 2 losses in a row for Minnesota to Detroit and the Rams. Is now the regression starting to hit this team like a freight train. That's what you have to ask yourself. And they trade for Cam Robinson for Jacksonville because they lose Christian Darrisaw, which is just a huge loss on the offensive line. Probably their best offensive lineman. Definitely someone that will be missed here for this Minnesota team, and how that offensive line plays without him moving forward. Look, it's going to be an interesting question. Make no mistake about it. What we're going to see from them. It was a devastating loss. He's one of the best left tackles in the NFL. And now the Colts should be able to get a little more pressure on Sam Darnold here in this game. And again, we see under pressure, he still does struggle. Now, we haven't always seen that pressure on him, and that's why he's had a good season overall. But the last couple of games, the Rams and the Lions have pressured him more, and he hasn't been nearly as sharp. And now they have DeForest Buckner back the last couple of games, the Colts, one of their better defensive players. That's certainly going to help them get that pass rush as well. So it probably will be an Aaron Jones game for Minnesota because the Colts still struggle to stop the run. So I think, Aaron Jones can maybe get something going here for them. On the flip side, you look at the Colts, Jonathan Taylor comes back last week at running back, huge boost for them. And I love what Shane Steichen's doing. I know you say, hey, he's your future at quarterback. You got to let him thrive on his own, but you also are trying to win this year and make something out of this season. And I think if you're going to make something out of this season, Phil, this is the right decision to go to the old veteran, Joe Flacco at quarter. Let's be honest. He's been better, period, than Anthony Richardson, especially the last few weeks. It's clear as day. We know the last few times he's been in there for the Colts. They beat Pittsburgh. Against Jacksonville, they lost, but it wasn't because of Flacco. He had a great game. He scored 34 points. The defense had a bad day. When Joe Flacco's been in there, he's played well for this team. You just can't have your quarterback go 10 of 32 like Anthony Richardson did last week against Houston. This is the right call. And I think the players they wouldn't say it publicly, but I think they're pretty excited and happy to have Joe Flacco.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, he's still got something in the tank. Now, you're going to get that odd interception from him for sure and mistake because he's older, and once in a while he will, but he's going to move the team. He's been very good throwing the ball. He's shown chemistry with Downs and Pittman and Pierce and a lot of these receivers for the Colts, which is good to see. I think they get a shot in the arm, and I think they'll play excited now this week. The Indianapolis, even after a tough loss to Houston last week, they'll play excited as a football team and rally around Flacco, kind of like what the Browns did last week with Jameis Winston. It's one of my favorite sides. With Minnesota coming back down to earth a bit, little overvalued, I like the Colts here, plus 5.5. They've been great underdogs. I think this is a competitive game. The Darisaw injury is a huge one for Minnesota. I think we have ourselves a competitive game on Sunday Night Football. Worst case scenario, hell, I wouldn't be shocked if the Colts go in there and win. But at 5.5, give me those points all day with the Indianapolis Colts here. I think this is a competitive game, and I think we're starting to see Minnesota kind of like a couple years ago. Remember, they had that red-hot start, and then regret started to hit them in the second half. Deja vu, perhaps, because it hasn't quite been that same Vikings team the last couple weeks. What do you think, Phil, here, Sunday Night Football, Colts?
Yeah, the last time the Vikings started 5-0, they missed the playoffs. So, that's the year you're referencing. Joe Flacco is clearly the right move here. Those receivers, I know I mentioned it before on the show, but when Flacco's in the game, those receivers play like, holy shit, I'm getting the ball actually.
They're 7-1 against the spread, Indianapolis. This year,
and that's exactly what I'm getting at here. I'm taking the Colts too, plus 5.5. Competitive game. I think the Vikings do win this one somehow. But give Joe Flacco a running game with Jonathan Taylor. Play action pass off that. He knows where he's going with the ball, man. He's a savvy vet. He knows what he's doing. And clearly, he doesn't. He has his moments of turnovers and whatnot, but I think the Vikings are going to move the ball here too. I think that this isn't an over as well. Geez, I keep saying over, so.
Did you see how the overs did last week though?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm thinking that, and I'm trusting Kevin O'Connell once again. They came out last week and they showed that they could move the ball right away against that Rams team. They sputtered in the second half, but Aaron Jones, I agree. I think against this Colts rush defense, he's going to go off for a good game as well. Darnold hasn't done anything that has killed this team. I think he continues to hit Justin Jefferson and, all these other receivers and weapons that he has with Kevin O'Connell calling the plays. So, but give me the points with the Colts for sure. I think this is a competitive game and an over as well.
Yeah, I'm with you leaning over too. I wouldn't be betting under. Like, it's hard to bet under after last week. I mean, I think all but 4 of the games went over the total last week. It was a huge, huge week for overs. Now, you're always worried, and I know a veteran handicapper that kind of mentored me when I started in the business 14 years ago always said when it's a huge week of overs, a lot of times there's a market correction the next week, and that the totals are higher, and you're going to see some, come back the other way a little bit. So maybe there's an under week, but I don't know. The way some of these matchups shake out, what I'm seeing from these defenses in a lot of cases, it's hard, I think, to make a case for some unders. I feel the same. I'm with you, though. I think it's hard to make a case for a lot of unders in these games, with what we're seeing from really the state of the defenses across the NFL right now. Just not a lot of them are playing all that great, at the moment, aside from maybe a handful of teams. All right, let's go to Monday Night Football. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City, 8.5-point home favorites, 45.5 the total in this game. From a spot perspective, I kind of want to take Tampa Bay here, getting all these points plus 8.5. I still think Kansas City, when we're asking them to lay numbers like this, they're not going to cover it. We saw it last week against Las Vegas. They were a favorite in this same price range. They only won by 7 against the Las Vegas Raiders. They're coming off that game. Now you're playing a non-conference team. You wonder if Kansas City is dialed in start to finish, full game against a Tampa Bay team that's going to be, I think, a little bit desperate now. The problem with, even though I lean Tampa Bay, what I'm struggling with as far as pulling the trigger and taking the Bucs is, A, they've got the injuries at receiver with Evans and Godwin. We know that, and it's a big deal. Although, they still found production last week. From Cade Otton was great again, the tight end, 9 receptions, 81 receiving yards. Raheem Jarrett stepped up. Jalen McMillan, Trey Palmer. They need everyone, stepping up. Sterling Shepard. It's a big, but they still found some production in the passing game. And they were able, obviously, to have success running the ball with Irving and White. 330 still through the air for Mayfield last week, even without Evans and Godwin. So they still found production, but the concern is that defense right now. Holy mackerel, they got big problems on this. Defense has collapsed big time for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, they gave up 41 to Lamar in Baltimore, 31 last week to Kirk Cousins and the Falcons, and this has been a defense that's been struggling now for weeks for Todd Bowles' unit. That's why they're 5 straight overs, Tampa Bay, coming into this game. And we saw it again against Atlanta, the second time playing Atlanta. And we've talked about, Phil's mentioned this theme twice on this show, and it happened again. They can't defend Kyle Pitts. 91 receiving yards, 4 receptions, 2 touchdowns. He's mentioned on the show, Phil, what's the term? Rerouting. Rerouting. They don't reroute.
No.
They don't reroute. And Pitts is wide open. There's these gaping holes down the field, wide open. Like you can see 20 yards of green grass in front of these receivers when they play Tampa Bay right now, and tight ends. And they're not rerouting. They're not Todd Bowles, like we said, he's not the second coming of Tom Landry. We know that as far as a head coach. But this is not the first time we've seen his defense just, whether it's scheme or what. Maybe they're in the wrong scheme. Who knows? But they are just not defending anybody down the field in the passing game right now. And it's a big problem. And if you're going to do that shit to Mahomes, who now is at least an aging, not the same DeAndre Hopkins, but even just having DeAndre Hopkins on the field opens things up for some of the other receivers now for the Chiefs as well. So that's my one concern with taking Tampa, but from a spot perspective, it screams Tampa, because I don't know if Kansas City, this could be that go through the motions, just get a win and get out of there type of game here for Kansas City. And they haven't always been consistently a good, bigger, larger favorite. So I'm leaning Tampa. Maybe you want to split it up with Tampa team total over because you don't want to fully trust that defense. And I think there's another game, Phil, where I think the full game over might be in play. Because, look, with the Chiefs now with Hopkins, I think they're more willing to push the ball down the field, not be as run-heavy and as deliberate. And obviously they don't have Pacheco anymore either for that. So I think it's a situation where, and Tampa 5 straight overs. Hard to bet a Tampa Bay Bucs game under right now. So I would lean over 45.5 here on Monday night. What do you think here, Phil? Bucs, Chiefs?
Yeah, I agree here. Buccaneers defense, just schematically, you're right. Schematically, anytime you send blitzes and play zone behind it and don't reroute anybody, and then also the blitz doesn't hit, you're leaving zones wide open. Mahomes is going to take advantage of that. The Buccaneers that being said, I remember last week talking about Liam Cohen and him getting his running backs involved in the game. I know that they as a team rushed for like 102 yards or something, but who is it? Bucky Irving still getting
Irving, yep.
receptions, 7 receptions for 40 yards. I mean, he knows how to utilize his talent. So once again, I'm leaning towards an over here. I hate saying all these overs, especially with how last week went, but I just think that the Buccaneers are a scrappy team. Baker Mayfield, he has his ups and downs, but he's not afraid to pull the trigger and push the ball downfield. I could see an over here, and I think that this 8.5 spread's a little bit high. I think the Buccaneers that they keep it closer than that. So I would lean Buccaneers plus 8.5, and then a team and overall total here as well.
He's a master, Andy Reid. Mr. Bundle Rooski, that commercial, man. I've seen it a million times.
Right.
Like I said, I want the drugs Andy Reid took to agree to do that commercial, but that's another story.
Yeah.
But I think you look at it. Look, Hopkins being on the field opens things up, right? Watson gets involved. Xavier Worthy's got more opportunity. He's used both tight ends, Travis Kelce and Noah Gray, to great effect. So the Kansas City offense is fine. And Kareem Hunt, has played reasonably well, filling in for the injured Isaiah Pacheco as well. So, yeah, I think there's going to be points here. And certainly the offense is still capable for Tampa, but we're wondering about that defense right now. Great stuff. We're not wondering about Philip Nelson delivering the goods here on the show. He does each and every week. Great stuff again, Phil. Let's wrap it up. Best bets. The best bets are heating up for both of us, but especially for you here. You're off 2 in a row here that you have cashed with Best Bet. What are you liking here for your NFL Week 9 Football Frenzy Best Bet?
Look, the Bills have owned the Dolphins. The Bills are home. Josh Allen's on a roll. Those receivers are playing at another level. The defense is coming around. I think the Bills, I think they beat the Dolphins by more than 6. I think that's a pretty safe one. And if you want to kind of, get a little bit more on that, I would lean towards an over as well. I think the Dolphins are going to move the ball, score some points, maybe, to cover that 49 total. But, I love the Bills -6 here. I think that they beat them by at least 10 or more.
All right, Buffalo -6 against Miami for Philip Nelson, looking for 3 in a row with Best Bet winners here on the Football Frenzy. My best bet for this card, a lot of good choices here when it comes to this particular slate of games. But I think I'm going to lock in the Colts. +5.5 against the Minnesota Vikings. I think they're live. And I think with Flacco under center, you're going to see this Indianapolis. Actually, there's a 6 out there with Indianapolis. +6 Indianapolis Colts. I think it's a down-to-the-wire finish, and I wouldn't even rule out the Colts maybe winning outright. Minnesota coming back down to earth a little bit after that 5-0 start. I think the Colts rally around Joe Flacco. They're getting healthier, especially on offense. Indianapolis on Sunday Night Football, +6 against Minnesota for my best bet here for Week 9. Phil, great stuff. Anything to say before we wrap this show up?
Yeah, the just going off of your bet there, I remember we talked in depth last week about that Vikings defense. No sacks last week. No sacks.
It's amazing how the pass rush disappeared. Have a 21-point lead or a 14-point lead every week.
Exactly. No sacks, man. Yeah. So, I like your best bet. I like that one a lot. I think the Colts do have that as a close game. God, I just can't see the Vikings losing 3 in a row. But at the same time, my friends from Minnesota would say they've had their hearts broken enough to see this type of a collapse. So, we'll see. But it's going to be a fun week. Can't wait to see how everything rolls. And good luck, everybody. Happy Halloween.
Doubt. Happy Halloween as well, especially if you're watching on Thursday when this show gets released each and every week. Phil, awesome. We'll see you next week for Week 10. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Hit the like button. Make sure you do that on the way out. For Philip Nelson, I'm Ian Cameron. Enjoy NFL Week 9. Enjoy the games and good luck. And we will be back next week for the Week 10 NFL edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.